Greetings to you, friends. Buddhism arose more than 2,500 years ago in India as a spiritual doctrine of the nature of suffering and the way to liberation from it. It would seem that the ancient religious and philosophical tradition and modern science, based on strict experiments in mathematics, cannot have anything in common. However, in the 20th century, with the advent of quantum mechanics, many scientists and thinkers began to notice amazing parallels between the views of Buddhist philosophy and the discoveries of physicists. These parallels do not mean that Buddhism predicted modern science, but they show that people deeply examining the nature of consciousness and reality can come to similar conclusions, albeit in different ways. To understand why Buddhism and quantum physics are so often compared, you need to consider the basic principles of both systems. One of the central teachings of Buddhism is the concept of shunyata, or voidness. According to her, all phenomena are deprived of an independent, self-absorbing existence. Any object exists only in conjunction with other objects, and its essence cannot be found. Things are more processes than stable and unchanged objects. Modern physics speaks of the same, but in a different language. In the 19th century, it was believed that matter consists of solid atoms, small bricks of reality. However, with the development of quantum mechanics, it turned out that atoms are mostly empty. The nucleus is tiny compared to the orbits of electrons, and the electrons themselves are not small balls. They are described as probabilistic clouds. Matter, which we consider to be solid and reliable, is in reality a dynamic game of fields and energies. In this sense, the Buddhist idea of voidness and a quantum understanding of matter are surprisingly echoing. Buddhism pays great attention to the role of the mind. Everything that we perceive is filtered through consciousness. The world exists only depending on perception, says Buddhist philosophy. What we see, feel, and think is not an objective reality, but the result of the interaction of external stimuli and our consciousness. Quantum physics unexpectedly came to a similar conclusion. In an experiment with a double gap, the particle behaves like a wave, while no one is watching it. But as soon as the device that fixes its position appears, it chooses to be a particle. Reality at a microscopic level depends on the observation act. Of course, physicists argue whether it is worth understanding this literally, but the very fact that the observer plays a key role sounds in Buddhist. Buddhism claims that all phenomena exist in interdependence. There is nothing that could be called absolutely independent. Personality, for example, is a combination of sensations, thoughts, memories, and processes, but not a static soul. Modern physics demonstrates a similar picture. The theory of quantum confusion shows that particles can be connected so that their conditions are determined by each other, regardless of distance. As a result, the universe does not look like a set of individual objects, but as a single network of relationships. Thus, the teachings of the Buddha and quantum physics unexpectedly converge in the fact that reality cannot be understood as a fixed and independent structure. It is dynamic, interconnected, and largely depends on perception. But these parallels are only the beginning. In order to truly assess the depth of similarity and differences between Buddhism and quantum physics, it is worth considering their philosophical consequences. When quantum mechanics only appeared, many scientists were shocked. Albert Einstein, for example, could not come to terms with the idea that the world is fundamentally likely. He said, "God does not play bone." But reality turned out to be more strange and illogical from the point of view of the classical mind. Buddhism, on the contrary, from the very beginning claimed, the world is not obligated to be logical. It can be paradoxical. To get closer to his understanding, you need to go beyond ordinary thinking. Buddhism teaches, I is an illusion. The personality seems integral and stable, but if you carefully consider it, you will not be able to find a constant I. We are a process, a stream of changes. Modern physics describes reality as a quantum field. Particles appear and disappear, turn into each other, and what we perceive as an object is only a temporary form of energy. Like the Buddhist idea, the essence of the object eludes when trying to find it. Buddhism uses koans, paradoxical questions and statements, so that the mind has to go beyond the limits of logic. For example, what is the sound of cotton with one palm? These paradoxes do not have a rational solution. They are designed to show the limitations of ordinary thinking. Quantum physics is also full of paradoxes. The particle can be simultaneously in several conditions. It can choose only when measuring, and confusing particles can interact instantly, even being at great distances. This is similar to scientific koans that make physicists abandon the usual understanding. Why is this comparison necessary for a modern person? The similarities between Buddhism and quantum physics do not mean that one proves the other. These are different systems. One explores the consciousness and the path of liberation from suffering. The other mathematically describes the behavior of matter. But their contact inspires new thoughts. For scientists, this is an opportunity to see that ancient philosophy can offer metaphors and ways of thinking that help to cope with the paradoxes of science. For practitioners of Buddhism, this is confirmation that their experience of meditation and intuition partly coincides with what modern science has revealed. And for an ordinary person, a comparison of Buddhism and quantum physics gives an important lesson. Reality is much more complicated than it seems. The world does not come down to hard objects and rigid rules. He is alive, variable, interconnected, and largely depends on how we look at him. Buddhism and quantum physics are two roads leading deep into the secrets of existence. One goes through internal experience and meditation, the other through mathematics and experiments. But at a certain depth, these paths begin to sound in unison. And perhaps it is this similarity that explains why people are increasingly comparing Buddhist philosophy and quantum physics. After all, both this and the other tells us the usual picture of the world is only the surface. A much more mysterious and multi-layer reality is hidden behind it. Thank you, friends, for viewing. If this topic is close to you, subscribe, like, and leave your comments under the video. There is still a lot of interesting things ahead. See you.